welcome you to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast, and we're continuing our study in Job, and we've come to chapter 12, which is Job's answer to Zophar. It's found in chapter 11. I'm not doing the chapters of Job's his comforters, they're so-called, his interlocutors, really. I'm not doing those because for one reason, God says at the end that they spoke falsely, and that their assumptions were so sinfully wicked that Job would have to offer sacrifice for them. Now, but I recognize from a literary standpoint, that's why I'm focusing on Job, but who is also not without sin. It's the dilemma of life, and I'm certainly not without sin in coming to these texts. But we do the best we can, and we're encouraged to read the scriptures. So I want to do that. I'm not looking at Bildad and Zohar for a specific reason, and that is, I think in order to understand accurately what Job is saying in 12, 13, and 14, he takes 3 chapters to respond to that particular chapter that goes before. To really come to an understanding of what Job is saying, it would have to be understood in the context of what Zohar has said, and that would take a level of commitment and ability that is beyond me. I'm just simply trying to open a beachfront, as it were, in understanding this great book. It is a tremendous book, but I want to focus on that which I can feel more secure with, and that is what Job testifies about God. And I'm going to look for what I can find about Christ. But if I were really going to study the book in its entirety, I would have to look at it the book in its entirety. And I just don't really have time to do that. So unless I'm willing to put it on the shelf forever, I want to know something about this book. I've studied it off and on throughout my lifetime, but never fully in depth. It's very difficult Hebrew. The Septuagint doesn't offer much help, frankly. When I see a text that looks suspicious, these are faithful. I believe these are faithful translations. I know some of the people on the committee of the NKJV. I think that they are faithful. They're doing their best, but occasionally I'll see something that makes me wonder, and I'll look up something, but very rarely. I'm not particularly focusing on the original text. I'm really having to work with translation rather than commit the work that I would have to really understand this book. So with those limitations, I'll do the best I can based on my experience, and hopefully that will get someone somewhere excited about maybe devoting their life to this book, which I think it would almost entail. So we've come to chapter 12, and Job answered and said, he says, no doubt, in the text I have, no doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. I would go with the original on that, just for the sake of clarification. The original traditional reading, no doubt you are wise, and wisdom will die with you. I think that it's intended to be sarcastic, and that's how he opens up his argument, refuting Zohar. You and his other companions, he's saying you are wise and wisdom will die when you die. I think it's quite an opening gambit there in his response. He's mocking their wisdom. He will show us that he understands that wisdom is the answer to all of his dilemmas. When we come to chapter 28, which is the opening of his final defense, that goes through chapter 31, and then we read the words of Job are ended. When we come to chapter 28, he begins with a hymn praising wisdom and showing its value above all other things. Job understands that wisdom is something that he desperately needs in order to understand his suffering and the meaning of it in light of his zealous righteousness that he had practiced Why is he suffering so superlatively? So, and I think the answer to that ultimately is in the mystery of God somehow. He is given to us as an example. James will talk about, you've heard of the patience of Job. I think he becomes a monument to, and patience is a difficult word there, but it's perseverance, really. You've heard of the perseverance, and I think he's a challenge to us to receive suffering with thanksgiving, recognizing that God is good and he is giving us nothing but good gifts. And even in our suffering, however excruciating it might be, there is a purpose, a redemptive purpose that will come out of it. He's longing for his Redeemer, as we will see. So he begins with this mocking of the interlocutors. No doubt you are wise, and wisdom will die with you, but I have understanding as well as you. And I do not fall before you, literally. He says, I am not inferior to you. Indeed, who does not know such things as these? I am one mocked by his friends. There's a real desolation in that, I think. His friends are the ones mocking him. The enemies we can handle, but when friends mock, that is an entirely different level. Who called on God, and he answered him, the just and the blameless, who was ridiculed. And this, I think there is a translational error indicated by the footnote that I have. It says a lamp, and it says or disaster. I think the best rendering of it would be misfortune is despised in the thought of one who is at ease. That is someone whose life is going along swimmingly, nicely, has very little patience and sympathy with someone whose life is a struggle. Why can't they be as fortunate or as industrious, perhaps we would say, or as diligent as I am? And so the contrast there is where we fall into difficulty. Because misfortune comes to all. And so he says misfortune is despised, however, and I think I observe that to be correct, is often despised, certainly, in the thought of one who is at ease. It is made ready for those whose feet slip. The tents of robbers prosper, and those who provoke God are secure in what God provides by his hand. And that's part of the mystery of life. Why do the wicked prosper? There's a whole psalm dedicated to that, Psalm 49. Why do the wicked prosper? And it almost causes the faithful to lose their grip. We could think of Psalm 73 too. But now ask the beasts, and they will teach you, and the birds of the air, and they will tell you. So he's saying, what is it that we need? How do we understand these things? Why the wicked prosper and the righteous their lives are difficult? He says, ask the beasts, they'll tell you, the birds of the air. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, and the fish of the sea will explain it to you. In other words, it's a cosmic principle. What is that principle? Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? Everything that comes to pass has been ordained of God. That is a fact. And if that's the case, here is one who is covered in sores and sitting on an ash heap, who has lost everything, including his reputation, lost all his family, lost all of his property, everything, even his health. He is telling us this, and he's acknowledging that surely God has done this. His companions who quarrel with him insist that it must be that God is dealing with him this way because there is some secret injustice with him that he needs to confess. But he doesn't know what that is, and that's his dilemma. So he knows, any creature can tell you that what God has ordained will come to pass. He says, the hand of the Lord has done this, in whose hand is the life of everything, and the breath of all mankind. Does not the ear test words, and the mouth taste its food? Wisdom is with aged men, and with length of days is understanding. And that anticipates the last and longest speech in Job, which will come when Elihu, the young man, comes and pours forth his wisdom, which is utter folly. God does not even respond to him at all. Because he should have kept silent. He was the youngest in the company. And wisdom, there is a component of wisdom that has to do then with experience, not just insight. It's not just simply a matter of IQ. It's a matter of knowing the passages of life and having experienced life. That is how we gain understanding with our wisdom. With him are wisdom and strength, that is with God, Job says. He has counsel and understanding. And then he slips into the 2 verses of a formulation. It's a protasis apodosis formulation. That means if, then. Protasis, if. Apodosis, then. It's that kind of a statement, and Job likes that, as we'll see when we get to chapters 29 to 31. Here he says, if God breaks a thing down, then is implied it cannot be rebuilt, if that's God's intention. If he imprisons a man, then there can be no release. Again, if that's God's intention. We know that these things can happen, but only if God ordains them. If he withholds the waters, they dry up. That is, the whole cycle, the hydrological cycle of life will end if God ordains it, as he did in the days of Joseph, with 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. He sends them out, they overwhelm the earth. With him are strength and prudence. The deceived and the deceiver are his. That's remarkable. The deceived are Job's friends. The deceiver is God. And Job is not deceived in terms of God's sovereignty. He is deceived in terms of God's justice. But all of these discussants belong to God, and he controls them. He leads counselors away plundered. Well, counselors didn't give wise counsel, did they? If they themselves wind up being plundered, there was something they didn't foresee in their counseling. He makes fools of judges. Judges are not omniscient. Judges are limited. They're totally dependent upon the evidence that they hear unless they're subject to a bribe, which many of them are, both in ancient times and in modern days. He makes fools of judges, and oftentimes the judge's ruling comes back to haunt him, to expose the fact that just judgment was not rendered. He loosens the bonds of kings and binds their waist with a belt. He loosened the bonds of kings perhaps could mean he dissolves coalitions that march in tandem against common enemies, but he binds their waist with a belt. He actually can enslave the kings. So he can turn everything upside down, and he leads princes away plundered. Again, the same kind of an idea. What kind of a prince is that did not foresee the day of his judgment? And he overthrows the mighty. He deprives the trusted ones of speech and takes away the discernment of the elders. God does that. He commands Pharaoh to let his people go from Egyptian bondage, and then he hardens Pharaoh's heart that he will not let the people go. All of that is in his sovereign purpose, and he is not answerable to any. Proverbs talks about how he turns the heart of the king any way he wants. So, and we see many illustrations of that in the text. He pours contempt on princes and disarms the mighty. Princes are supposed to receive honor, and here he shows how contemptuous he is of them. It's really quite a remarkable exploration of the implications of the sovereignty of God. He uncovers deep things out of darkness and brings the shadow of death to light. He makes nations great, and he destroys them. So the cycles of geopolitics are all in his hand. He raises up princes, Paul will tell us, and he puts them down, and the ones that be are ordained of God, which is a lesson we need to observe and know. He brings the shadow of death to light. He makes nations great, destroys them. He enlarges nations and guides them. He gives the nations a day of prosperity, but then a day of judgment will come. All the cycles seem to be in play in this understanding. And the reason is we don't have what Plato calls the philosopher king, or what the Bible calls the priest king. He must come to set all things in order. He takes away the understanding of the chiefs of the peoples of the earth. We look to our leaders for guidance and for wisdom, but God can simply strip them of that discernment and make fools of them and bring their kingdoms to naught, if that's his will. He makes them wander in a pathless wilderness. They grope in the dark without light, and he makes them stagger like a drunken man. My goodness, what a statement of God's sovereignty. Continuing to chapter 13, behold, my eye has seen this, my ear has heard and understood it. What you know, I also know. I do not literally, so I'm not inferior to you. He's literally saying, I do not fall down before you. But I would speak to the Almighty and desire to reason with God. But you forgers of lies, you are all worthless physicians. I love that phrase, that he's telling his counselors, often called his comforters, who bring false comfort. But he says, you're worthless physicians. You're here to help to heal me, and in fact, you're causing more harm, violating, as it were, their Hippocratic oath. Oh, that you would be silent, and it would be your wisdom. He wants them to just shut up. He's tired of hearing this. He says, oh, that you would just be silent. That would be your wisdom. If you really knew what was at stake in this contest, you would keep quiet. That speaks also of Job, by the way, I think, because we're not told that he has any understanding of the cosmic struggle that's going on in his own experience. Hear now my reasoning, and heed the pleadings of my lips. Will you speak wickedly for God and talk deceitfully for him? I don't think the Lord God would take kindly misrepresentations of him, and so we labor and study to know his word and to speak it justly and correctly. And if we don't, that's to our own peril. So he's speaking something like that. Will you speak wickedly for God and talk deceitfully for him? Will you show partiality for him? Will you contend for God? Will it be well when he searches you out? Or can you mock him as one mocks a man? The answer to that is obviously no. There's no way. He will surely rebuke you if you secretly show partiality. Isn't that interesting? What does that say about the judges of the earth? Will not his excellence make you afraid, and the dread of him fall upon you? Your platitudes are proverbs of ashes, your defenses are defenses of clay. Your platitudes and your defenses, the places where you think you've summarized human wisdom, some epigram or statement, that oracular statement that seems to encapsulate a sempiternal truth. All of that is dust, ashes, and your defenses are defenses of clay. And clay, of course, speaks to the weakness of man that must die and return to the clay. Hold your peace with me and let me speak. Let come on me what may. He's stirring up his conscience and his courage now to make a statement. And this statement is going to be profound. So he says, why do I take my flesh in my teeth and put my life in my hands? Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. Even so I will defend my own ways before him. Though he slay me, I will still trust him. I think this is a remarkable, a very beautiful statement of faith, because Job is at the point of being slain. The only thing that's been restrained is the enemy taking his life from him. But he's lost everything. He's gone through tremendous suffering. I think that only comparable to the human suffering of Christ himself is Job. And he says, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Beautiful, beautiful statement of faith there. Even so, I will defend my ways before him. I trust him, but I want an opportunity to explain myself because I think I've been relatively innocent from the law. Why am I think Job would say, suffering so superlatively. So he says, he also shall be my salvation. A very clear understanding that God is going to restore his previous blessings and enlarge them. And Job knows that, even going through all of this. Perhaps that gives him a secret hope. He also shall be my salvation, for a hypocrite could not come before him. Listen carefully to my speech and to my declaration with your ears. See now, I have prepared my case. We're going to see him lay out that case when we get to Job 29 to 31. It's a magnificent case, and we'll want to take a look at that. The rhetorical beauty is really, truly remarkable there. He says, I know that I shall be vindicated. How does he know that? How can anyone know that? Certainly not in the courts of this earth, but in the court of heaven, he knows that he will be vindicated. And if he's vindicated, it's because of his faith. Who is he that will contend with me, if now I should hold my tongue and perish? Only two things do, not do, to me. Then I will not hide myself from you. Withdraw your hand from me, and let not the dread of you make me afraid. Then call, and I will answer, or let me speak. Then you respond to me, how many are my iniquities and my sins? Make me know my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face and regard me as your enemy? Quite a plea here he's making. Will you frighten a leaf driven to and fro? He's speaking to God here. It's a kind of a prayer. Would God be so, minimized in our understanding that he would actually express anger toward a leaf driven by the wind and pursue stubble? Stubble is an interesting word. In Exodus 15, Moses uses the word stubble as a metaphor, as God has scattered the Egyptians upon the sea like stubble in the field. And that answers his previous command to Israel that they would be given no more stubble with which to make the brick. And so, in the hardness of his heart, because he said they were lazy and they were asking for these special concessions. And God remembers that, and Moses does too, in his Psalm of Rejoicing in Exodus 15, after they pass through the waters of the Red Sea. He says God has scattered them like stubble again. Stubble. Our works are good hay, wood, hay, and stubble, if they're not gold, silver, and precious jewels. So the idea has some serious biblical currency. For you write bitter things against me and make me inherit the iniquities of my youth. You put my feet in the stocks and watch closely all my paths. You put my feet in the stocks. He's unable to walk. He's imprisoned, as it were. Jesus will literally be imprisoned and his feet nailed to the cross along with his arms, that he might not move or undertake any effort to free himself. You put my feet in the stocks and watch closely all my paths. You set a limit for the soles of my feet. And this is Job's commenting upon his present condition. It's a very desperate state. The chapter concludes with the word, man decays like a rotten thing, like a garment that is moth-eaten. That's a strong idea here. Man decays like a rotten thing. When I think of this, I think of the pumpkin after a season, how it falls in on itself. And to move in Greek is trophe, and to move inwardly is entrope. It becomes our word entropy, which is one of the laws of thermodynamics, that systems tend to decay and to die when no energy is put into them. They will tend to fall in on themselves. We will fall in on ourselves unless we partake of food daily. So he's saying, man decays like a rotten thing, and everything that is human ultimately will fall in on itself and perish. That's true of man individually, but it's also true of all of the institutions that men make. Where are the empires of old and all of that? They've all fallen. He says, like a garment that is moth-eaten. And that's an emblem too. It's used in the New Testament. It's used in Hebrews. Of changing a garment, and we will one day put on a new creation, like one would change a garment that has been eaten of moths. That was a serious condition in the ancient world, because 1/3 of the economy was in providing clothing, dedicated to providing clothing. All that had to be woven and spun and all of that. And the moth comes in, and then secretly, Jesus uses that as an illustration of things that we store up and treasure in this life, and how they're being secretly eaten away by rust and by moth, and thieves will come and take. So there is nothing secure in this world, ultimately. Well, that's enough. We'll come back to chapter 14 when we continue.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. If you enjoyed this message, please be sure to like and subscribe to one of our channels so that you never miss an episode. We'd appreciate it if you could also leave us a review. You can find us on drwarrengage.com, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. To support the podcast and gain access to exclusive offers and content from Dr. Warren Gage, please visit our Patreon account at patreon.com/Dr. Warren Gage. We hope you join us next time on the Dr. Warren Gage podcast.